Hello, I'm Marissa Martino of Paws Reward in Boulder, Colorado, and you're listening to the Paws Reward Podcast, where we stop and reflect on behavior change, dog training, the human-canine bond, and the relationships with our loved ones. I am very excited to have podcast guest Monaco Torelli. She's the founder of Animal Behavior Training Concepts in Chicago, Illinois. Her career began in 1991 with Chicago's Shed Aquarium, where she trained beluga whales, dolphins, sea otters, seals, river otters, and penguins. After nearly a decade at the Shed, she moved on to the San Diego Zoo and the Brookfield Zoo as a lead supervisory trainer. During her time in the zoo community, Laura worked with a wide variety of species, including primates, large cats, birds of prey, horses, parrots, tree kangaroos, giraffes, red pandas, and finally dogs. She is currently part of a wildlife rescue and rehab training facility, Wildlife Discovery Center in Lake Forest, Illinois. She's a faculty instructor for the Karen Pryor Academy for Animal Training and Behavior and serves as a teaching assistant for Dr. Susan Friedman's Living and Learning with Animals online course. If you are a training professional and you have not taken that course, please do so. It's amazing. Behaviorworks.org. She has presented at many, many conferences and has been featured in the media many times. And I brought her on the show to talk about something I think she's incredible at, which is cooperative care. So on to the podcast episode. Hello, listeners. I am very excited to have Monaco Torelli on the podcast today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on your show. Thank you for the generous invitation.
Oh, thank you for being here. So Laura and I formally met when I reached out to her. I mean, obviously I knew the greatness of Monaco Torelli before I reached out to her. But I formally met her when I reached out for assistance with Sully. So as he was aging, he was having a hard time using the many, many, many stairs in my townhome, which I don't think I will purchase a townhome moving forward owning dogs. It's like way too many stairs. And so we worked on getting him to the point where I could use a surgical sling to wrap around his lower waist to help support or like alleviate some of the pressure on his limbs. And so that's how we first met. And it was an amazing experience. I learned so much just from the session from you. So thank you for all the work that you do. And one thing I love about Laura is her love for her animals. And so I wanted to start off the show with, can you share, many folks know who you share your life with, but can you share who you share your life with and what your favorite things are about them?
Thank you. I share my life with, or they let me share their life with them. We have two rescue tortie cats. They're going to be 5 this fall, 5 years of age. Their names are Topolina, which means baby mouse in Italian, and her sister. Well, they were found together, so they're thought to be sisters. And then her sister Lucia, and we call her Bear Cub because Lucia bear hugs everything, and she carries dog toys around the house, and she bear hugs everything. She's just so affectionate, and she looks like a scrumptious dark bear cub. And then we currently have our 2 Rhodesian Ridgebacks. Santino, who's sleeping behind me. He is going to be 12 years of age next month. It's 12. Wow. I don't know where the years are going. And then Vito, who is Santino's nephew by blood. So they bred Santino's brother. And Vito is downstairs resting in his crate. He had a nice jaunt in the backyard today. My husband names our dogs from the movie The Godfather. So if anyone knows, our previous Ridgebacks were Luca Brazzi and Clemenza. So those were the Godfather's bodyguards. And then, of course, Santino, and then now Vito. And of course, then I share my life with my husband, Jim. And Jim, Jim I knew through Shed Aquarium. We met in 1995 when I was a marine mammal trainer there, but we were friends, strictly just friends for 8 years until 2003, started dating and then got married 3 years later. So Shed Aquarium plays a thick history in my life in many ways, professionally and personally. But that's
Yeah.
currently who I share, or who shares their lives with me.
So today we're going to be talking about cooperative care, a topic that I think Laura is really fluent in and has achieved so many amazing training goals with a variety of species. And before we get started, would you mind defining what we mean when we say cooperative care with our dogs?
Absolutely. And I'm going to, dip back into early in my career, starting at Aquarium. It was in 1991. So I was a young pup. I was still in college. And I learned early on, from Ken Ramirez and Lisa Takaki, that cooperative care is under the umbrella of every interaction that we have with our animal. It's not like a specialty behavior. So I feel very lucky that early in my career, it wasn't like, teaching a voluntary blood draw with one of the marine mammals was a specialty cooperative behavior. All the nuanced interactions that we had with the animal were part of that dialogue and building that reinforcement history over time. So to me, cooperative care is every interaction that we have with our animal. And then I like to complement that with, it's every interaction that we're having with the handler end of it as well. All the handlers that are involved in that animal's care. So I try not to compartmentalize cooperative care just focused on an animal, a dog, a bird, a giraffe. It's everyone that's involved is part of that cooperative care network, so to speak. So the long way around getting to your excellent question is, to me, cooperative care is, under best practices and ethical considerations, is every interaction that we have with the animal care team in front of us. And then cooperative care is just such a big word, right? It means so many things to so many people. And then that's where we kind of parse out, what does cooperative care mean to this dog team at this moment during this part of this specific procedure. So don't know if I answered your question, but maybe going down a rabbit hole.
That was perfect. No, and I appreciate, I think, I love that you brought this up, and I wanted to weave this into this conversation somehow, and it's perfect for right now. I love that you bring up your initial experience with cooperative care, right? That it's not just, like you said, it's not a start button. It's not just, we're going to do a nail trim. It is like, it's the dialogue, like it's the approach. I mean, it is the lens or the approach that we're even having a dialogue, right? And it's all the interactions that you're having with that animal, not just in okay, we have set up all of our antecedents and I'm going to communicate with you that we're going to do a nail trim. And I think when you and I started working together, that compartmentalized viewpoint, like I remember getting really stuck with, like, well, I need a start button. And you said to me, I thought this was brilliant. Yeah, but there's many times that I've observed animals that were doing a start button that were very, like, visibly stressed. So just because they're opting in by way of the start button doesn't necessarily mean that it's cooperative, right? And so, I think that how we have been taught as trainers, it feels very compartmentalized, or at least that was my learning experience. And you've really helped me expand it, that it's not just a behavior, right? It's more than that. Obviously, we're looking at how the animal is experiencing the experience, right? So I just love that you had that as your initial learning history, and you're helping us expand beyond just that one behavior we're looking for. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Well, and I feel fortunate that I continue to have great mentors, and I learn from not just my mentors, I learned from those that I partner with. Like, I learned from your excellent questions. I learned from reviewing your videos with your handsome boy, Sully. And, again, I'm just so sorry about the loss that you had to go
Thank
through,
you.
because it's part of the heartbreak when we give our heart to something that we love so much. So thank you for including me in
You're
your
welcome.
lives together, because I feel like I learned so much from him and so much from the videos that you sent in your excellent questions. Because just watching the subtleties in your sessions with him, or I believe in some of our email dialogues or in like our Zoom call back and forth, I think of the excellent work of like Lori Stevens. She does amazing work about, looking at body conditioning and the balance of the animal, and looking at where the animal is with their medical concerns, where they're at with how they might be feeling and why they might shift their body a certain way. So when you were sharing your excellent videos with the sling training and working on approximating you and him up and down the stairs, it wasn't just about him. It was watching that narrative between you two, where I was asking, how do you feel about doing this approximation? How is your balance? How do you feel holding the straps that way? Is this comfortable for you? Because if you tumble and you're not comfortable, we're gonna tumble, and our dogs are gonna pop back, and then what can fall out from then? So it's this ongoing part of where I look back to early with working with exotic animals, and even with the wildlife rescue that I work with now, where I work with raptor rescue. And before I'm going to ask the bald eagle Betsy to step under my glove, I want to practice what the glove feels like on my hand and the angle that I'm going to present the glove before I have a bald eagle in front of me. How am I going to present the reinforcers so she's not going to have to tip forward with her very, very powerful beak and powerful talons that are like balancing and really pressure into my glove? How can I present the food in a way where she's comfortably centered, or approximating like an owl to step onto a scale voluntarily? The work that you did with your boy and the way that you presented the reinforcers, the way that you cleaned up your dialogue, really helped him. So he was showing you what he needed. You observed it, and you were able, with your wonderful skill set. You are such a joy to watch.
Oh, thank
Skilled
you.
trainer, you were able to make changes within like seconds to say, okay, so Sully needs this, I'm going to do this. Sully needs that, I'm going to do that. And this is where I'm grateful for my colleagues, like Eva Bertelson and Emily Johnson Bay. Their great conversations about like start buttons and what does that mean. I like digging deep with my colleagues about how we're flexible second to second, and thinking about how Dr. Friedman is, kind of compares it to us being on a tennis court, and we're waiting on the balls of our feet to see what does the animal or the handler across send back to us to say, well, this is my next piece of information back to you. That's where I like to dig deeper into like the chin rest behavior, which you and I have chatted about. Just because a dog is resting its chin doesn't mean it's comfortable in that position. And how can we reinforce what we're saying is a no? We are labeling it as, well, the dog picked up its chin, it's saying no. And I'm like, but there's a whole lot of yes there that I'd reinforce, which I've talked about like in other like a clicker expo. If you were to cue a dog to rest their chin, but you introduce the sling at whatever approximation, visually, hopefully fully transparent. Like, I have something, it's no secret.
Yeah.
Even if it were to touch Sully's side and he picked his chin up to look at it, I would click and treat that. Yeah, look at it. Look at it. That's something even better. Then you can use your shaping skills to raise and drop criteria from there. But there are times where I think, keep that rate of reinforcement high. Like, the dog looking or orientating to the acoustics or to the taste or to the sight. Why not dig a little deeper? And that's what I had fun doing with you and Sully. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll never forget. I had one colleague of mine tell me very much in the beginning, I was like, okay, so if he lifts his head up from the chin rest, I wouldn't reinforce that, right? And she was like, no, you still reinforce that, right? Not even just because maybe it's not a no, like you said, but we're also then putting animals in conflict. Like the only way to get access to the reinforcement is if you're in that position. So then is it a true yes? Is it a true opt-in? Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah. I would agree that it's a conversation that would need a fun conversation with a colleague or a client in that moment to take a closer look at it, and to not perhaps have the approach of being so linear in that viewpoint.
So linear.
Is to be really flexible for us to say, how about this or that? Like I was having a Zoom chat with another one of my mentorship teams recently, and they had their dog outside. So their dog was outside. It was a bit warm. It was a bit humid. They were working on a chin rest behavior, and I had offered up as a consideration, and I said, if you're going to cue a chin rest when your dog is outside after they've been running and playing, and your dog's mouth is open because their respiration rate is getting higher, if you're going to cue a chin rest, then I would look for these important considerations. Or maybe if they rest their chin, but their mouth is open. So we could have a chin rest, but the dog is comfortable going like this. Or, maybe that's not a time to cue a chin rest, because if the dog backs away and they're flaring their nostrils to try to get a breath, there's so many nuances to that chin rest behavior that I've adjusted to, that I've made changes over the past decade on too, where, I wouldn't cue my dogs to do a chin rest under certain conditions. I might cue like the clownfish trick, like going between my legs, or how about a lateral recumbency, or how about you're just stationing, you're just standing in front of me doing all the good stuff. And I think you and I might have chatted about, I like to also coach to not to consider teaching a procedure under different contingencies, under different positions. So it's not always clean the ears when a dog is in a chin rest, Dremel the nails always when a dog is in lateral recumbency. Why not put that variation in there to have different setups? Like bring them, like, husbandry on hikes, get them on a hike. And this is, again, just leaning back to my zoo and aquarium background about these other considerations too. And being patient with the human learner. I think about some of the great work, like Kathy Sadeo. She's so compassionate in so many ways, but the way that she supports the human learner is just mind-blowing. And when you hear her, she's just like, well, have you thought about this? Or even like asking you, like, do you feel comfortable doing this work with Sully? How do you feel about having to do this? I have a new client team where their vet asked them to teach their dog to do basket muzzle training. But I asked the client, do you feel comfortable teaching your dog to do basket muzzle training? And they said, well, no, because my dog growls at me when I bring out the basket muzzle and it makes me feel sad. I'm like, oh, well, there's a deeper conversation, right? So,
Yes. And I think I want to give a shout out to your conversation with Hannah Brannigan on drinking from the toilet. I just remember driving in my car, listening to that podcast episode, and when you were talking about the human end of the leash and how a lot of these experiences have been aversive for the human learner, right? Because either the dog is escalating or there's just been a negative experience for both involved. And I just loved when you were talking about this, because I have had clients where like they don't want to push, right? Like they don't want to push criteria, even though they can. Like there's obvious signs that we can push a little bit because they're just like frozen because they don't want to create stress for their dog, or like just have any sort of regression in the plan because they're like really trying to make sure that they're working under threshold. So I really appreciate that you bring this up, because you're right. Like if I'm thinking about that client with the basket muzzle, how are her thoughts going to impact her behavior during that training session, right? And so I love that you create space for that additional conversation so that that's not like bleeding into the training session in some way, or if it is, just being aware that it's there.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And yeah, big shout out to Hannah. So many neat conversations that I have with Hannah as well, because Hannah isn't afraid to go deeper on it. And what I appreciate is having this type of a dialogue, like having this type of a conversation with you, where just because someone asks a question doesn't mean the other person should get offended. It's just, I have a question. Could you maybe try to explain it from a different perspective than what you did? And then that's a cue for us, because in my head, it makes sense. But to the dog owner, it doesn't. Or to a colleague, maybe it doesn't. And this is where I tip my hat back to, like coming from, like, I'm just going back to a situation of like working with the sea otters at Shed. There's a systematic clearing process before I would ever be alone with the sea otters, or working one-on-one. And I remember Ken and Lisa, as part of that clearing process, saying, we feel comfortable based on our checklists that you have met and exceeded criteria. We are comfortable clearing you, but do you feel comfortable working one-on-one with this animal?
Yeah.
And this was like 32 years ago, like 31 years ago, learning early that, are you comfortable working with this animal one-on-one? Because if you're not, then let's find out where you want more work with us to help you, and then go. And then I had another moment like that where for many years I worked as a staff trainer for Dr. John Sirabasi, and Dr. Kelly Ballantyne was his behavior resident then. She is now a board certified vet behaviorist. And part of my job as the staff trainer was I might have to restrain the dogs or the cats for a blood draw during the behavior consultation. And there were moments there too where I remember Dr. Ballantyne and Dr. Sirabasi, asking me, like, Laura, do you feel comfortable restraining this dog, knowing that it might have a bite history or this potentially fractious cat? So they would ask me, do I feel comfortable doing a restraint under these conditions in this appointment? And it wasn't just, you have to do it because the client's here and the cat is here. And there were a couple times where I said, can you review for me what the restraint would look like for this cat? So we would practice with like a towel. They would show me, or I would say, well, where are you planning on doing a blood draw with the dog? Is it jugular? Is it going to be a back leg? Is it going to be a front leg? So we would talk through what the procedure would look like. And then are we all in agreement? Are we all, good? And then within seconds, based on the animal's reaction, we would shift, right? And we would be flexible and say, okay, we're done. We're not going to go a step farther. The dog or the cat isn't ready. And then they would make the referral back to the referring vet. And I'm so grateful for that, Marissa. I was so grateful that it wasn't like, no, we have to get this. Now, are there conditions that, yes, like emergency, this has to happen. We need the blood work. The dog is crashing. Yes, there are situations like that. But just to, go back to, your point about my chat with Hannah, and even your and I conversations about your sweet boy, Sully, like, how are you feeling about this? How are you feeling about the stairs situation? What do you not want to do? What are you avoiding doing?
Yes, the what are you avoiding doing is such a good question. But just for the listeners, like, that is such a simple question. Like, there's 2 points I want to say about that. One is, like, if I'm going to go walk my reactive dog, or if I'm going to sit down to do a cooperative care session, or if I'm going to do like home alone training or whatever, like, do I personally feel comfortable to do that right now? And if the answer is no, then is there something that can be modified in my environment in order to make me feel comfortable? Or maybe not, like, maybe now is not the right moment. And I think there's a lot of my clients are like, I have to get it done. Like, a lot of my clients are really, really committed. I'm super grateful for that. And they want to achieve, right? They really want to do right by their dogs. And then sometimes the answer is like, maybe right in this moment, it's totally okay for you not to do the training session, or for you not to take the walk, or like pausing is maybe the better behavior choice versus like rushing in and carrying some of that stuff, that emotional stuff with you. So interesting.
And I have a new client team, and we're meeting for our second session tomorrow. They live right in downtown. Like I'm looking out my window and I can see the high rises, but they live right in the loop. They are just north of where I live. And, this client is asking me excellent questions. We've only had, one Zoom session and one in-home session. The dog has had an opportunity to reinforce behavior that's been effective for the dog, that has worked for the dog. And the client was asking me excellent questions. And in the first in-home session, I said, are you comfortable if I videotape? Question 1, it's a yes or no. 2, I will send you the videos before I leave, so you have them in your video homework library before I walk out the door. And then you will see how I work with your dog if your dog wants to work with me. So I'm going to show you what your homework will look like if you feel comfortable doing it. And then I stop my passion talking. I always hear Teresa McKeon from Tag Teach on my shoulder. Okay,
me too.
Like, how much are you going to keep talking there, Lo? When are you going to show them? Right. So I'm like, all right, if you want to record with my phone, if you feel comfortable under COVID protocol, I'm going to hit record, and you just stand right here and just hold it. And then I'll have them watch me do like a 30-second or a 1-minute session with their dog, and then we'll hit stop. I'll send them the video. But another one of this client's emails came through 2 days ago, and I said, you are asking such excellent questions. So when I come back Saturday afternoon, I'm going to be right next to you, so I can see the baseline as much as your dog can baseline behavior with me there. And you're going to watch how I'm going to handle it while you're there and while we're videotaping. Does that sound like a good next step for you? So I didn't do this diatribe of an email response. And then the client reads it going, yeah, still didn't help. I'm still in the weeds with this. And it was like, well, how do you feel about the next step is? I'm going to see you in 2 days. And they were like, thank you. Yes, that sounds like a great step, right? Santina, you want to say hi, baby? But reinforcing the question, empathizing and saying, I get it. This is really stressful for you. And I'm sorry that it's stressful for you. And your dog has become effective at this behavior because we're looking at this behavior serves a purpose. And there's a reinforcement history. And then we just kind of parse it out through there, and that's what I enjoy doing, is providing that support and reinforcing someone for saying, I'm struggling, and I'm reaching out to tell you that I'm struggling. And, to say, all right, let's see what we can do together from here versus, well, it's not that hard. I just punished them for saying I'm struggling by saying, well, but what you're saying isn't that hard. So now the client's going to clam up and not be fully disclosing with me. Is that English? Yeah. Fully disclosing. So I feel like I'm passion talking. I'm going to swing it back to you.
No, I love that. Because I think, what you're doing there is you're taking what we know about behavior, right? And you're using it with the human learner, right? It doesn't end at the dog. It really is the whole relationship between us, the client, the dog, right? So I love that you're doing that, especially reinforcing the questions, right? That's so great.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So I'm thinking about the listener that might be like, well, how do I start this? Which that's a really loaded question, right? Because it depends on so many variables that you've been alluding to. But I'm wondering, you were talking about a chin rest, you're talking about lateral recumbency, you're talking about station, right? Like there's specific behaviors that I'm wondering if you wanted somebody who's learning about cooperative care to, like, where should they start, right? Because it really can be very complex. what are some key ingredients that you would want that person to learn more about or possibly start training with their dog?
Oh, that's such a great question. Oh, we can go hours on this.
I know.
Is see the value early on and the benefit of second or third person training happening all the time around them, because at some point during a vet or a grooming procedure or a pet sitting or a dog walking, in our collaboration, other handlers around the dog's environment are going to quickly become context cues. And I don't want context cues to come across as detrimental. Um, so, for instance, like I posted a week or two ago, more of my client teams and the veterinarians that refer me are inviting me to come in to the vet appointments now because COVID protocol has opened up. So, to stem to your excellent question, one of my client teams has Mr. Moo Moo, who is a beautiful Newfoundland. He's 7 months old. They're not going to be putting him under to neuter soon, so he's going to be intact for a bit longer, but they want to get him microchipped.
Mm-hmm.
And Vito and Santino are microchipped, but they're still intact. I didn't neuter them. So the owner or the family said, can you talk us through how to prep him for a microchip? And I said, I would love to. And I said, are you, one, receptive to me joining you on the vet appointment? And if you are, two, ask your vet if I can come to the vet appointment, right? And then three, if I can treat your dog while you're there watching what we're doing and building on that collaboration. Because the long way around to your question is, and what I've seen happen numerous times, and this is where I think of the great work of like Dr. Sophia Yin, the wonderful work that she contributed. And when and then I look at the subsequent work of like the Fear Free, Dr. Marty Becker and his team. And then I look at the great work of, like Dr. Deb Jones and, everyone has been weaving in cooperative care more and more. And I said, if Mr. Moo Moo learns early on in his young life that he shows up at the vet and he and you, the owner, are getting flooded with too many procedures, and it's gonna layer and layer and layer, and then he's gonna get sensitized. And I think about how Dr. Ballantyne talks about asking the vet team, what are your needs and what are your wants? What do you want to do with my puppy or my rescue dog or my foster dog? And what do you need to do? So we prioritized the appointment and said, do you need blood? No. Do you need a weight? Yes. Do you need to microchip? We don't have to microchip, but it would be ideal. And so for Mr. Moo Moo, he doesn't know a chin rest yet. He knows how to station. He's learned that standing in front of the handler has a reinforcement history. And then I worked with the owner on, like I think you and I talked about, varying reinforcement strategies and using space as a reinforcer. And so I think an earlier tip for your listeners would be early on, develop a collaboration with all the caregivers, even company that comes over, because company coming in is eventually going to be the vet or the vet tech taking a step closer to your puppy, and then having to touch the puppy, and then looking in the puppy's ear, and maybe down the road doing ear medicine, and building that relationship early on. That, like my husband Jim, I'm like, I'm going to bring the dogs out if you can just sit in the chair, and I'm going to work on different stationing positions of the dog standing in front of you. And then if you can, bend down and pick up something off the floor, but it happens to be near a back leg. And those small click points of like 30 seconds here or there, once or twice a day, and then bring it on the road. Bring your husbandry care. If you're on a hike and there's kids playing tennis, but you've got the tennis court fencing around you, why not do some click points while they're running and moving back and forth? So I've seen vet procedures over the years where the handler team gets flooded, the care team, the vet team, the grooming team gets flooded, and there's no way out, and they've just expected too much of everyone ahead of time. So some takeaways would be ask the care team, what do you plan on doing during the vet visit? What does it look like? And how can we mock it up at home safely, and mock it up in small iterations, and then prioritize, like, what do you need to do? What do you want to do? And then the needs, I triage, so for my dogs, if they need to get their anal glands checked, that's the last thing I do on the vet appointment. It's the last thing. And we click and treat and we get out of the vet clinic. I'll use sniffing outside the vet clinic and getting out of the exam room, or, like breaking it down, because it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And, a blood draw procedure is more than just the needle goes in, they get the blood, the needle comes out, yay. It's those nuances where we see a lot of avoidance get punished. And so then the dog learns, as you and I know, we look at like Dr. Kendall Shepard's Canine Ladder of Aggression handout, which anyone can access online, or Lily Chin's work that she did with Dr. Sophia Yin about reading dog body language. Toward Rugas has a great resource online about reading dogs' canine communication escalation. There's so many great resources out there. Or like I think about, I know I'm like all over the place in this answer, but I think about like how Jean Donaldson wrote in one of her books about like, so a dog growls as communication, but then we were punishing a dog for growling. Or was that like Pat Miller, her like, don't punish a dog for growling. There's so many nuances of so many great tips out there. But I think for the average dog owner, they might get set up under conditions where they didn't know they had a voice to maybe prepare for something ahead of time, or even know what the exam was going to look like. So back to your original excellent question, ask the vet team or ask the grooming team, what does this appointment look like to you? What are you planning on doing? And how is that going to break down? And can I be present for it? And what can I prep to do at home? And can I bring treats? And if I can't be with my dog, can you give them these treats? And if my dog's behavior escalates and you feel like you need to reach for a muzzle and this isn't an emergency, could you not muzzle my dog if it's not an emergency, right? And tell me what's going on. Like more of a dialogue without being disrespectful to the, I always want to respect a veterinarian's role, because thank God for them. We need to thank our vet team every day for what they do, and our grooming team for keeping our dogs immaculately groomed. But there's so much of a collaboration that continues to happen there, that maybe sharing for your listeners, don't be afraid to ask questions. And if someone's making you feel punished for asking the questions, it might be worth casting a wider net to find a support system that you're feeling heard. You just prescribed my dog eardrops, but what does that look like? I have to give my dog three eardrops a day, but what does that look like? Can you show me what that looks like? Can you do a video of doing it like in the exam room? And again, it's so deep and rich. It's such a thick topic. So yeah, me. Really I don't have a quick answer for anything, but there's a lot of collaboration that's there. And I was thinking too, before our chat today, I launched, I just happened to call it Ready, Set for Groomer and Vet, but I launched the program back in 2007, 2008, just here in downtown Chicago, when our clients would have puppy class or bring their dogs in, for what we would think is obedience. But care is more than obedience training. So we would start check your dog's ears, and then let's go for a hike. Here's a scale, let's weigh your dogs in, and then let's do these fun exercises instead. And I feel so lucky from every team that I learned early on, because some of the dogs are avoiding the scale. And then I'll see this no way out, sit, you're fine. And the dog is like, I'm not fine. I don't want to go on the scale. So yeah. Did I really give much of a honed in answer there for a great question?
No, I do. You did. I think one of the things I want to say about that is I just love that there is a team out there that reached out to you and was like, I want to make sure Mr.
Yeah,
Mumu, is
Mr.
that his
Mumu.
name? Yeah. That he's okay receiving a microchip. Like, the lengths of care and consideration for his experience there, it like really warms my heart, especially coming from my experience. My background is animal welfare.
Yes,
And
yes.
yes, there is a fear-free movement in animal sheltering. And yes, there are ways to engage with the animals in a very different way. And there are also things that need to be done, right? For like the herd health of the entire organization. And even now we're saying, like, do we really need to vaccinate this animal? Like, let's give it 24 hours. Or like there is a conversation about what is truly a need and a want, and why do we think that these things are a need, right? So I think I just love that this person was so considerate to that. Like, it really warms my heart, especially because Sully was the type of dog that I could do things to him, right? Like, he never escalated towards me. Was he evasive at times? Sure. Would he allow me to do it? Yes. And could I have done better by him? Probably, right? Like, I probably could have done better in terms of like our handling together. And I'm thinking about the listener that's like, wow, like maybe I really should take a step back and see when I like, almost like a small approximation to even leaning into cooperative care, would, to me, feels like just being aware of the dog's body language, right? Like, just being aware of like, when I do this, what do you do? And then when you do this, what do I do? And like, what loops do we find ourselves in together as a team, before you even like pick up the clicker and the treats and the nail trim and like the place where you're putting the chin rest, and right? It's like all of that feels so
Yes.
layered, right? Like you said, like it's a big step. And so yeah, it just made me think of that. And the other thing that I was going to say about what you said that I really, really appreciated, that I'm embarrassed to admit that I didn't take it into consideration before I started working with you and before I was doing more cooperative care techniques with Sully, is how stinking important contextual cues are, especially the other person, right? But like, it's not just going to be, I mean, in some procedures, it's just you and the dog, right? It's maybe you just doing the nail trim, but in the procedures at the vet's office, there are other people there, like, and it's a totally different space. And can your dog get into that position in that exam room? And so all like thinking through all that, I think is such a great skill to start with, again, before you even pick up the clicker and the treats and the Dremel and whatever, right? So I really felt like you inspired me to like, okay, I really need to sit down and think about this and practice this without him so many times, instead of making all the mistakes with him, knowing that he's very forgiving. But there's a better way to do this, so I'm a better teacher with him, if that makes sense.
It does. And you know, these animals in our lives are such great teachers. I'm looking at Santino. He's sleeping next to Topolina right now. You know, I also think, you know, and I've heard my mentor say this, you know, nothing that I'm saying, you know, now it's not like, oh, Laura, you know, Laura made that up. No. I remember Dr. Susan Friedman saying that it's not that we're making a mistake. It's an opportunity of more information about what we might want to change or do different.
Yeah.
And so thank God, you know, thank goodness that the animals I've worked with, exotic and my own, in a session I went, well, I didn't expect that, or wow, that was pretty overt avoidance behavior. Thank you for showing me that. So what am I going to do next? Because some, you know, in my head, it's a great plan. And when I go live, I'm like, oh, this is so not going in the direction I was planning. With Mr. Mumu, I did post on my social media pages the actual microchip. So, you know, if any of your listeners, you know, visit my social media pages, I did post, it was like a short, very edited iteration of that. And then for Vito's recent vet behaviorist visit, I asked Dr. Ballantyne, like, do you feel comfortable cueing Vito's tricks? I'll show you what they look like. And then if it's up to him, if he wants to do them, and two, if he wants to take treats. And a year and a half ago, Vito, not so much, would have been wanting to do tricks during an in-person behavior consultation. And I will share with you, Marissa, that I have been, very, not hard on myself, but just, always worried about Vito. And for Dr. Ballantyne to say, Lo, that's my nickname. She said, Lo, I know you don't see it because you're in it every day, but this was like a great session. He ate treats from me. He did tricks from me. He wasn't pacing as much. Like, progress is happening. And I was like, I needed that because sometimes, Marissa, I can't see past it. Mm-hmm. I'm in it. I'm worried about him, all the time, or my animal, or maybe an owl, so having that collaboration. And I think another tip, back to your great question, is for your listeners is seeing the value in collaboration to build a team that you feel safe to say, can you watch this and let me know what you think from your eyes on it? Because part of learning is being open to a safe network of someone saying, good on that. That was a good decision on that. But did you see this? And then being open to that feedback, because I'm always learning. I always want to improve as a trainer. So to have someone watch something on the outside and say, I don't know if you noticed this, but this might be something to watch closer on, can help build that camaraderie that we need at times when you and I were like, I'm not feeling inspired to work on this at all because this is just hard, and it's okay to feel that way. But then that's when we have our network come behind us and say, hey, how about this? Or another tip that I like to offer, especially for my teams that are working on some hard husbandry tasks like voluntary injections or nail drums, like nail care or ear care. And I'm like, what do you find fun with your dog? Like, do you do trick training? Do you like long sniff hikes? And kind of finding the fun of having a dog again for maybe those where it's not fun right now. It's not fun. This is really hard. And looking at that network too. I had the joy of finally meeting and then co-presenting with Trish McMillan a couple months ago at the Canine Conference, and hearing her work within like shelter work, which I know you do a lot of fantastic work as well. That's not an area that that's not my area of expertise, is shelter and working with rescue work and working with foster work. So I think swinging back to questions for her, or even like a question for you, how do you coach people that are in the weeds? Like it is not fun anymore. What tips have you found helpful to get people to maybe, I don't know, feel supported? And maybe hard decisions, right? Whatever that decision is, we are supporting you in this hard decision. What have you found helpful in that narrative?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think, especially given the state of sheltering right now, sheltering is really challenged right now with the sheer volume of animals, the behavior cases that are entering the care, the high turnover rate. It's such a bummer because it's like, COVID is sort of, I don't know what COVID's doing, but it's like less intense as it was before. So shelters finally got through that in some capacity, right? Like changing all their procedures. And then now there's just like an influx of so many animals coming into the shelter for various reasons all across the country. And I think when I've worked with organizations in the past, or when I have managed a behavior team in the organizations I've worked for, is giving, it's kind of perfect. I didn't mean it to be, but it's very much on brand with the topic that we're talking about, is that like everyone can tag out, right? So if you need a no buoy, right? So like if you need to opt out of the situation, you can, because the more we opt in and push ourselves over thresholds or opt in with resentment, whether that is like, I need to go evaluate 3 more animals, or I need to do a training session with this dog, or, I need to do restraint. It's like, if you're having a hard time, or even when you're engaging with the public, right? If you are really over threshold that day and you've got one more intake to do, like being a leadership that says yes to, you can opt out, and then respecting that, and then really like fostering a culture where the staff feel empowered to do that. I think, to me, that's so critical, right? Because like choice is reinforcing for all of us, right? So I think that has been really great, where like staff members have come up to me and been like, I can't. And I'm like, okay, no problem. What can you do? Right? Or, yeah, you don't need to do that right now. Let's wait till tomorrow. And even when I have had to make really hard decisions about animals and their flow, a lot of my staff members or my colleagues would say to me, like, we don't need to do this today, right? It goes back to your like needs, wants thing, right? Like, I want to get it done, or someone told me I should get it done, or I'm feeling the pressure, and yet do I need to do it today? Like maybe I don't. Like maybe actually it's not true that I need to get it done today. So choice goes back to choice, which is very on topic.
Well, and you brought up, I think, important subtopics that bring me back to some of my early coaching. And even like beyond shed, when I went to San Diego Zoo and when I went to Brookfield Zoo, but learning, how, we are rushing. We are, we're servicing habitats, we're scuba diving, we're scrubbing, we're doing food prep, we're doing records. And there's only like so many minutes in an hour. Yep. And I remember, and I'm really grateful, especially when I started working with, pet owners, is reminding them, kind of like that pre-session meeting. So if I was like doing food prep and then I was scuba diving and scrubbing a habitat, and then I would get back on deck and I would, take my scuba gear off, but I had to go, let's say, run to feed the river otters, or, go to feed one of the primates. We always would have a pre-session meeting. So we would, built in 5-minute minimum, meet as a team, look over the plan. What animal am I training? What, are the vets here for a reason? Does the animal need medication? How, and kind of just taking a breath or two. Ground. Because, I think, gosh, what if back then I wasn't grounding myself and I just ran in with the troop of spider monkeys, which would have never happened because it was protected contact. Did not do free contact training with spider monkeys. That was all protected. But I did do free contact with other primates. Slow down, even if it's just for however, like if it's a 30-second, what's my plan? I'm present with the animal, what am I going to do? And even if we're in a session and we go, wow, that dog just the dog air snapped at me, and we're going to go, we're going to stop now. And we're just going to wrap things up. Let's step away. And I think for most dog owners, and this is a completely subjective and like blanket statement, I think for some dog owners, they get flooded with, well, this is what you have to do. You have to do this. So if you're on a walk and your dog lunges at another dog that's across the street, you have to, let's say the advice is, pop the leash back and yell no. You have to do that for whatever reason. I know this is like I'm just making up like a story, but the owner in that moment might not feel a way out. Maybe they weren't given, here are some things to keep in mind. Who knows, right? And that's where I think under the cooperative care umbrella is we balance the human end. We look at what does the procedure look like, who's involved. Even for my boys, if they're going to have a vet exam, but it's like a new vet tech. I will ask ahead of time, like, is this a vet team member that's new, or is this someone that we've worked with before? Oh, there's someone new. Oh, okay. Friendly reminder, like about Vito, is he's scared of other dogs. So we'll wait in the car. And when the lobby's clear, can you cue us just by waving? I'll unload him and we'll walk our way like in, and I'm never afraid to advocate, just to say, which happened last week. I had to bring Vito in for another recheck appointment. And there was this cute little small, it was a pug. And this cute little pug was sitting under the owner's chair in the lobby. But I was going to have to walk Vito within about 10 feet of the pug to get to the exam room. And I looked at the pug and I looked at the vet tech and I said, I worked really hard with Vito. I'm predicting the pug won't be too stressful for him. But if the pug dashes out under the chair and wants to play with Vito, that could trigger stack him. And I will tell you, his vet appointment is not going to go in the direction that I'm hoping. And they're like, oh yeah, thanks for that reminder. So we were able to set that up. So when the vet had to check, something with Vito, I didn't start it ahead of this cute little pug, although little, and maybe would have wanted to play. Maybe it would have been affiliative, but for Vito, he'd be like, that's a hard no. And then he would have tried to run out of the vet clinic.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was, yeah.
I love that you bring that up because, in terms of advocating, right? Juliana DeWillems.
Yes.
Correct.
Juliana's amazing.
She and I did. She's amazing. I love her. And she and I did a podcast episode on how to advocate for your dog, right? And like when it's hard, when it's messy, when it just all the different layers of what that looks like. And I love that you are reminding our listeners that you probably will, which can be really uncomfortable for some people, have to remind people often. Like, it's not just like, hey, I told you this about my dog the one time, and then everyone remembers, right? Especially a vet care team, right? Where you might have rotating staff, or someone is new there that day, like really finding your voice and being comfortable with, hey, I want this to go as successful as possible, the same way that you probably want this to go as successful as possible. Could we maybe modify the environment, right? Like, I think that's such a good, important reminder for everyone to really get a little bit more comfortable practicing saying what you need for your dog.
Which is,
great.
Another great point that you bring up about where in someone's learning history did they learn it wasn't okay to speak up?
Yeah.
And are they afraid to speak up because they might feel that they're not being respectful to the vet team, or that they're being, that person who, oh God, they're always this, they're always that. But to springboard from that too is, what if Vito has never, knocking on my head, Vito has never lunged at and tried to bite another dog in an aggressive way. I mean, he plays with Santino, but it's playful. What if the little pug did run up to Vito to be like loose and bendy, and
Seriously.
Vito was so scared that he bit the pug? Now I'm going to be devastated thinking the rest, well, again, subjective statement, blanket statement, but now the pug learned that going into that vet office was painful and scary. So now my dog, out of fear, bit a dog. And then I would be devastated to think, oh my gosh, what's the fallout for the other dog? What's the fallout for the owners that saw that happen?
Yeah.
Now, hopefully most of the listeners of vet clinics have those contingencies in play ahead of time. I know ours do. Like, okay, this dog has a bite history with other dogs and people. We will not walk that dog through the lobby when there's another dog team there checking out. I don't know, but maybe those that are listening that work for vet clinics, or maybe like when you work in your shelter environment, setting up, like I'm about to bring this dog out of here.
Yep.
Are those kind of setup plans that you go through with your team too? Like, let's not have this stimulus around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Like having procedures for that for sure is definitely necessary. Yeah. Well, Laura, thank you so much for having such a great layered conversation about a topic that so many people love and are trying to wrap their heads around, right? As we've said, it's layered, it's complicated, there's a lot to it. And so hopefully listeners have found some places to start and some things to consider in their own journey.
You.
So
I
thank
could
you for
stay
being
for
here.
hours, but thank you so much for spending time with me. I'm a big fan of your work, and I'm just, thrilled to be one of the many fun guests that you've had on your podcast. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And where can folks find you online?
Oh, sure.
We'll link to all your social, your great videos and such in the show notes, but where can they find you online?
My website is monacotorelli.com.
Awesome.
Oh,
great. Thank you. It's so great to have you.
Thank you.
The theme music is called Sunny, provided royalty-free from bensound.com. The audio is mixed and edited by James Eady at beheard.org.uk.